If you're anything like me, it might be some time until a 5-star decides to grace your Chaldea. That's why I'm making this series, designed for beginners, to look at the true heroes of Fate's Grand Order, the servants who stick by you through thick and thin. No matter how many times Gilgamesh or Skata laugh at your wasted quartz. Welcome to this beginner's guide to Fate Grand Order, where we take a look at some of the lower rarity, more easily accessible servants within the game. Over the coming weeks, we'll look at all manner of free-to-play servants, whether they are 1 to 3-star servants, or even the occasional welfare 4-star, and see how they could be put to use in your Chaldea. And with this game's summoning rates, they'll probably see use for a while. To keep up with new videos in this series, please leave feedback and subscribe if you enjoyed. Now on to the show. We start with the king of Spartan, Leonidas. Leonidas is a 2-star bronze lancer easily available from the Friend Point Scout. His primary role is that of a taunt, able to provide protection for your other servants against all manner of opponent, except for sabers, the natural lancer killers. He fulfills his role primarily through his noble phantasm, Thermopylae Enomotaia, which provides a 3-turn taunt in addition to a self-defensive buff. Aside from this crucial defensive role, he also adds limited, although notable, offensive support, especially for buster teams. Let's take a closer look. For Leonidas, everything starts and ends with his noble phantasm, Thermopylae Enomotaia. Built upon the legend of 300 Spartans valiantly defending their territory to the last man, it symbolizes everything Leonidas is as a servant. Thermopylae Enomotaia consists of a 3-turn taunt that comes with a self-defensive buff of between 30% and 50% depending on the overcharge effect. This provides durability and defensive support when taking enemy hits, and allows him to stand on par with fellow 2-star taunter, Georges. It also packs an offensive dimension, coming with one-time star generation. This drops a whopping 25 critical stars at NP level 5, something incredibly easy to pull off given how readily available he is from the Friend Point Scout. Thankfully, this is not tied to his overcharge, which instead primarily affects his defensive buff, making this quite easy to access. Taunting is Leonidas' primary role in the field, and so accessing his NP as quickly as possible is really the key to unlocking his full potential. As befitting a servant as brave and valiant as Leonidas, his skill set is dedicated to supporting his allies. His first skill is Rearguard's Pride rank A, available immediately upon summoning him. It provides a 1-turn taunt, along with NP gain over 3 turns. Now while the taunt can be potentially useful for eating a noble phantasm or shielding more important offensive servants from critical damage, it lacks any defensive buffs, essentially making Leonidas a sitting Spartan duck. It even compares unfavourably to the defensive boosted fellow skill-based taunts of Georges or even Musashibo Benkei. However, what makes it stand out is the attached NP gain. Even at base value, it provides an impressive 50% NP gain boost, eventually rising up to 100% upon reaching level 10. This is vital to his kit, as his NP gauge can be quickly filled, enabling usage of his noble phantasm. His second skill is Battle Continuation rank A, a high-ranking Guts skill. Lasting for 5 turns once applied, this brings him back from the dead upon his health being depleted. It is extremely useful within Leonidas' taunting niche, adding to his own survivability and letting him protect his allies for 1 more turn. But interestingly, it is actually through his third skill that Leonidas distinguishes himself among his fellow taunters, namely Warrior's Warcry rank B. This buster support skill increases Buster effectiveness for all allies between 15 to 25% over 3 turns, with an impressive 5-turn cooldown at level 10. This provides Leonidas some offensive capacity within teams, especially in Buster lineups, where he presents an offensive boost over rivals like Georges, especially if you're willing to sacrifice just a little bit on the defensive end. Leonidas' only passive skill is Magic Resistance rank C, which gives him some level of resistance to debuffs. While this is nothing special, it's always a useful skill for taunters, who have a habit of getting themselves debuffed. An oft overlooked aspect when looking at servants is in terms of what materials they need to upgrade their ascensions and skills. Being a low rarity servant, Leonidas' demands are thankfully quite low, although the scarcity of some of the items in the early game could prove quite challenging to newer masters. To ascend him to max level will require items including Claws of Chaos, Void's Dust, Octuplet Crystals, and the dreaded Evil Bones. All of these items will drop from story missions, in addition to events and the occasional training ground. Find more specifics linked in the video description. However, this certainly places him on the more difficult end of the spectrum as far as low rarity servants go, especially as many of his required resources cross over with other excellent low rarity servants such as Kuhu Len. When it comes to skills, it's much the same story. Items such as Void's Dust are again needed, which might prove tough for new masters. Leveling each one up to level 4 is quite easy, and each provide useful bonuses that make this worth it. Long term, leveling Warrior's Warcry rank B to level 6 would certainly be beneficial if you plan to use Leonidas within a Buster setup. As for the other two skills, they can be put on hold until resources are more plentiful. At the heart of Leonidas' legend is the Battle of Thermopylae, and at the heart of his kit, as I've said, is his Noble Phantasm. As such, any craft essence placed on him should really focus on allowing him to fill his gauge as quickly as possible. For newer players, Dragon's Meridian is an excellent choice, starting his NP gauge at 50% once max limit broken. For those who are more fortunate with the gacha, the Imaginary Element is a great choice, or if you're really lucky, Kaleidoscope. Just a brief note, try not to use craft essences that include a buff for NP strength. As Leonidas' Noble Phantasm doesn't do any damage, this will sadly have no effect. As a taunter, Leonidas fits well into almost any team composition. Outside of battles against opposing sabers, it will generally come down to whether you are looking for a more defensive-oriented taunter such as Georges, or someone who can also bring offensive support, like Leonidas. He works well with most of the major 5-star support options, including Judelion and Merlin. And here is a quick list of Leonidas' strengths and weaknesses. Obviously, the biggest strength being that 3-turn defensive buffed taunt through Thermopylae and Omotaia. He also has easy access to considerable NP gain through Rearguard's Pride. He has survivability. As I've mentioned, his Noble Phantasm gives a defensive buff, and he has that crucial battle continuation skill, that gut skill that brings him back to life. He offers offensive support through his Noble Phantasm, that one-time heavy star drop, in addition to Buster support, and then, quite importantly, he's a low-cost option. 2-star servants only add 4 points to the overall party cost, making Leonidas a preferable option. Finally, other than fighting sabers, he can fit into numerous team setups, making him highly flexible. That isn't to say he doesn't have his weaknesses. Rearguard's Pride is an awful taunt. It only lasts 1 turn, and unlike Benkei's, there's no defensive buff. This means he really requires a starting NP gauge craft essence to actually be effective as a taunter. He needs access to his Noble Phantasm. It can also be quite difficult to obtain some of his Ascension and skill upgrade materials in the early game, although this isn't too much of a problem. As a 2-star, he has poor stats, although there are ways to rectify this. For example, I grailed him, which improved his health stat primarily, which makes him an even more effective taunter, just by one simple grail, getting his max level from 65 to 70. And finally, he provides only limited offensive damage capacity. As I've noted, his attack stat is low, and he's not the best star generator outside of that one-time drop. Overall, his long-term utility as a taunter, with occasional buster and offensive support, allows him to prevail over some more defensive-heavy peers in the right situation. Therefore, I am very happy to give King Leonidas a rating of 300 out of 10, a score this mathematical genius would surely approve of. I've been Soondunes, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please leave feedback and subscribe. I'll see you next time.